Report on a journey to the western states of North America and a stay of several years along the Missouri, during the years 1824 to 1827, by Gottfried Duden. 12th letter, St. Louis on the Mississippi, 26 October, 1824. After an 8-week journey by land, I have finally reached the place near which I am planning to take up my temporary residence. I believe that here I can best investigate what a European can hope for in western North America, and what difficulties he will face. Above all, I shall observe the procedures followed by the inland settlers when they want to transform woods or savannas in the arable regions into farms and cities. I therefore intend to go into the midst of the new settlers to buy so-called unimproved property and, imitating them, make an attempt at transformation. If I wanted to buy a farmstead that is already established, which may often be a more advantageous plan for the person who has no purpose other than to acquire a farm, then I would probably become acquainted only partially with the many difficulties connected with the first stages of settling. I expect nothing from mere excursions from an urban residence. To carry out the main purpose of this long journey, I wish to do exactly what everyone must recognize as the most expedient procedure. Moreover, the plan has other good points, for I am freer in my choice. If I select a place on government land, I can, in addition to the profitable aspects, give more thought to the amenities of life, which are certainly not unimportant in similar isolation in a foreign country. However, I must not forget that I am really writing this letter to describe the trip here from Louisville. We were on the road for 12 days. 4 English miles below Louisville, we left the state of Kentucky and crossed the Ohio, which is about 2,000 feet wide here, to New Albany in the state of Indiana. The little town has, to be sure, a beautiful location on the charming bank of the Gentle River, but it nevertheless made an unfavorable impression on me. Several houses were vacant and seemed to have been abandoned before their completion. In answer to my questions, I was told that times were hard. The Americans have been spoiled by the long wars in Europe. At that time, they received exorbitant prices for their produce, especially for wheat. Therefore, they inquired often enough whether another war would not break out soon. After leaving New Albany, we drove in a northwest direction, away from the Ohio River into the interior of the state by way of Paoli and Washington to Vincennes. We crossed rather high hills, which one would call mountains in Germany. All were covered with dense forests. The species of trees are the same as those in the state of Ohio. Settlement in the interior of Indiana is still very backward compared to that of Kentucky and Ohio. The towns are mostly unimportant and do not deserve to be called towns. Often a European cannot refrain from laughing when he is told that he is in the neighborhood of a Lisbon, a Paris, and so forth, and he then comes upon 3 to 6 miserable huts. The same holds for almost all the states. However, one must not be misled to base his conclusions on this as to the general state of affairs. In North America, the planning of towns is a matter of speculation, the success of which is very dependent on circumspection and calm investigation, which are not always practiced here. The choicest settlements are along the Ohio, the White, and the Wabash rivers. The state was established in 1816 and at present has a population of about 150,000 souls. Slavery is as little permissible as in the state of Ohio and in Illinois. It is claimed that this law is not favorable to the rapid progress of the interior. The state of Ohio has been able to increase its population more easily through the immigration of poor settlers from the Atlantic states. Settlements in the more remote regions, however, require more means, which are almost exclusively in the possession of such persons who, because of their education and their circumstances, are relieved from spending all their time in physical labor, and usually make use of servants or slaves in establishing settlements. As long as the population is sparse, servants are very expensive. I have stayed overnight in houses that were very luxurious in their accoutrements, with costly carpets in all rooms, but one asked in vain for a servant. The landlord was compelled, in spite of his considerable wealth, to care personally for the horses as well as for the guests. Furthermore, his wife and daughters had to perform the most menial household tasks. Their only topic of conversation was that They wished to sell their establishments in order to move to a state where one could keep slaves. A day's journey before Vincennes, we saw in an inn a black bear whose behavior delighted us greatly. He was about 3 months old and had been caught, quite young, at the side of his mother who had been killed. A large bowl of milk was placed in front of him. He embraced the bowl with his front paws as if they were arms, and as soon as someone made an attempt to take it away from him, he tried to hold on to it and to pull it toward him. At the same time, he uttered noises of defensive complaint, not unlike those of a peevish child. Vincennes on the Wabash is a city of about 350 dwellings, with 2 printing shops, 2 churches, a Presbyterian and a Roman Catholic, a courthouse with prison cells, a seminary, a post office, and steam mills for flour and lumber. It was founded in 1735 by French immigrants who settled here far from the civilized world and in the midst of hordes of Indians. By way of the winding course of the Wabash, Vincennes is 154 English miles from the Ohio, as the crow flies, however, scarcely 60 miles. About 40 miles below Vincennes, likewise on the left bank of the Wabash, and still a part of the state of Indiana, is New Harmony, a colony of Württembergers founded in 1814. The population is about 800. Formerly, they lived near Pittsburgh. They engaged in manufacture and wine growing. Viewing themselves as a separate religious sect, they live in strict isolation from the rest of humanity under their director and pastor, G. Rapp, whom they call Father, and in whose name all business affairs are carried on. Several miles from Vincennes, the hills and the dark forest disappeared. The landscapes now assumed a character totally different from those we had seen earlier on our journey. According to my description, the journey from the Atlantic coast up to this point had led us largely through forests that cover a rolling, mountainous, or hilly surface in charming alternation with smaller and larger river valleys. Not many miles before we reached the Wabash, we came into the region of the savannas, the natural meadows, which extend through the wide plains of Illinois to the Mississippi. The inhabitants of the United States call them prairies. To be sure, we had come upon a few small meadowlands several days before, such as are found even in the state of Ohio. However, that is unimportant compared to the plains that meet the wanderer's eye in Illinois. It is assumed that 2/3 of this state, the area of which is estimated at 50,000 square miles, about 2,300 German, consists of plains. The plains in Indiana, like those in Illinois, are of 2 kinds, low and high. The latter are about 30 to 100 feet higher than the others. The low ones, of which there are few, are largely wet and devoid of woods. The highland plains, on the other hand, are surrounded by forests, and individual groups of trees rise here and there like islands in the midst of the grassy plains. The soil is, in general, very fertile. At Vincennes, the humus has been found to be 22 feet deep. The usual depth is 2 to 5 feet. There one can see for himself for how long any fertilizing will be superfluous because of this rich humus. Fields near that city have been under cultivation almost 100 years and still show no signs of exhaustion. It is believed that these low plains owe their origin to water, and that they were at one time in part the bottoms of lakes. The highland plains, however, are extended, at least visibly, by the accidental and intentional burning of the grass, which takes place almost every year and never leaves the edge of the forest undamaged. Therefore, one is probably justified with regard to its origin, in thinking of the common practice of the Indians setting the grass cover afire for their forest hunting. These large meadow areas did not make a pleasant impression on me. Also, for many miles between Vincennes and St. Louis, the water tasted of iron vitriol, and repelled me because of its sulphurous odor. This is due to a stratum of earth which is said to be very extensive. However, the water is not considered unhealthful, and the farmers, as well as the livestock, have become used to it. In the spring, innumerable flowers may clothe the region in beauty, but I do not think that this attractive feature could balance the unpleasant factors. In brief, my opinion on the trip through Illinois was that, despite the descriptions of Mr. Burbeck, no one should voluntarily leave Europe to settle on these plains as a farmer. However, I am reporting this first impression to you without declaring it unchangeable. I shall remain here long enough to put it further to the test. There was nothing that interested me here except the large prairie chickens, which weighed little less than a goose and taste rather good. What pleased me most was that we could cross the country so quickly because we were traveling during the dry season. We passed through plains 6, 10, 12, and 20 miles wide. The rapid travel by wagons found few obstacles except those that slowly move in brooks and rivers. Near these, there was a change to wooded hills now and then, which seemed more inviting. But we came to dislike these places because the wagon turned over twice. The second accident occurred at a great distance from a blacksmith, and if we had not as a precaution, provided ourselves with ropes, hand drills, and screws, our vehicle would surely have left us in the lurch. This had happened to a low chaise, which lay by the wayside with a broken shaft. In traveling through Indiana and to Wheeling, and Illinois, one does not have such a choice among inns as on the highway to Wheeling. However, except in case of bad luck, one can always get by. Everywhere along the road from Louisville to St. Louis, there are passable lodgings for the night at intervals of 15 English miles at most. But one must not neglect to provide oneself in the inns of the cities with lists of good houses and also the distances between them. These are available in part in printed form. If the description of Friedrich Schmidt ever coincided with reality, much must have changed in the last 3 or 4 years. We were never in danger of our lives. We ourselves were to blame for our wagon turning over. Neither did we have to swim across any river. We found ferries wherever they were necessary. Moreover, except along the navigable rivers, one can buy enough good land, not only in Illinois but also in Indiana, for $1 1/4 per morgen. In the southern part of both states, first-class land next to navigable rivers, but safe from floods, has long been private property and costs at present $4 to $6. I take this opportunity to warn anyone against the mistake of considering the arable land in the neighborhood of American cities as cheap, because such extensive areas are still available at some distance away for low prices. It is not infrequently the case that the fields near the cities are sold for $200 to $500 per morgen. This is true especially of the city of St. Louis, which I like to use as an example of one of the most remote cities. The city of St. Louis lies on the west bank of the Mississippi, 15 miles below the mouth of the Missouri, at 38 degrees 36 minutes north latitude, 982 English miles from the capital, Washington. The width of the river here is more than 1 English mile. A large boat, which is propelled by wheels and 2 horses, furnishes the connection with the other bank. It can be compared to a steamboat, except that instead of steam, 2 horses are used to keep the paddle wheels in motion. It is easy to see what an advantage such an independent vessel has over the so-called flying bridges. The fare for one wagon with 2 horses amounts to $2 1/2. The east bank is low. The west one, however, beyond a low, narrow terrace, rises to a height of about 70 feet and extends into a plain that is several miles wide. The plain's foundation is hard limestone, which, however, is covered by a very deep layer of fertile humus. In spite of the good soil characteristics of the entire plain, the region around the city appears rather desolate, as the woods in the vicinity were destroyed long ago and low bushes have replaced them. In the beginning, as early as the last half of the 17th century, St. Louis was merely a military post and was fortified as such. Only the ruins remain. In 1764, the building of the city began. The old houses built by the French differ very noticeably from the new houses of the Americans. What the last change in supremacy is worth to the states west of the Mississippi can be seen here also. In 1810, the city had only 1,600 inhabitants, and now there are approximately 6,000. Nevertheless, considering the splendid location, it is surprising that the population does not grow more rapidly. It also strikes one as strange that the fertile soil near the city is not at all utilized and that food products are almost all procured from the East Bank, from the state of Illinois. The inhabitants are mostly out-of-state merchants who concern themselves with nothing except the quick sale of their wares. Few own property, and some of the married ones did not even bring their wives along because they considered their stay here so transient. In St. Louis, there is the see of a Catholic bishop. Now I'm taking leave of you for a long time. My next letters will pertain mainly to the chief purpose of my journey. I hate to give you opinions that I myself cannot yet substantiate. You will remember that several years ago, in 1820, I believe, a Hanoverian by the name of Ernst brought a company of colonists to North America. He chose the state of Illinois and settled at Vandalia, the seat of the government. The undertaking failed. Mr. Ernst, who had previously become bankrupt, died of a virulent fever. He is criticized in regard to the prosperity of the young city for having placed too much weight on the seat of the government. To be sure, a German can more easily make such a mistake. Furthermore, it was said that Mr. Ernst had paid the traveling expenses for many persons without making proper provisions for repayment, and so His kindness was poorly repaid.